Welcome back for the second portion of Joy in Our Town. Thank you for joining us once again. I'm your host, Tammy Jo Johnson. Our guest for this segment is Jenny Eversole, head of the Loved Ones of Prisoners Central Ohio chapter, also known as LOOP. She joins us today to discuss disparities in the prison system, along with how these disparities affect the economy and our society. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So before we get started, tell us about LOOP. And I know that I said what it meant. Tell us what it means again so that our viewers can understand what that means.
It's Loved Ones of Prisoners. And in 2011, Linda Davis had a tragedy. And she reached out to God and said, what am I going to do with this? And so she started Loved Ones of Prisoners.
Wow.
And then last year, she encouraged us to start a Columbus chapter. So we've are now in our 15th month of the Columbus chapter.
And you're head of the Columbus chapter. What are your responsibilities?
Well, I want to give the families information that they may not have. And I have an open phone line that they can call me. And some, mothers, if they can't come to the meeting, we have a meeting once a month at our church, allows us to use their facilities.
When you say information, what do you mean?
What's going on in the prison system, encouragement. Our wonderful director, Gary Moore, is working on some fabulous things for the prison system to reform it. He's working on specifically right now to do away with mandatory sentences, which is just a biggie, And his idea is to stop the mass incarceration. And Mike Davis is the spiritual director for the state of Ohio and the reentry. And they're just two wonderful people that are trying to do God's work in the situation they're in.
And so that's the motivation behind LOOP?
Yes.
Wow.
And we also visit prisons and the waiting rooms. And we may just walk them through the logistics of signing the papers and signing in here and what there's going to happen next. And then we sit with them and tell them they're not alone.
Oh.
And everyone in LOOP has or has had a loved one in prison. So there's no reason to feel ashamed or any other emotion because we've all been there. Wow. And we just want to reach out to those families and love them because sometimes most of the time they're very distraught.
Right. Wow. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk a little bit about the disparities that are taking place in the prison system. Tell us a little bit about what a disparity is and how it affects people in prison.
I think that in general, it's the poor that are discriminated against. And the reason is they can't afford the attorneys that some other people can. And they can't reach out to their loved ones because of, now that Director Moore did get it changed from 75 cents a minute to 5 cents a minute for telephone calls.
Okay.
And so that was a big change because it really opened up for the loved ones to call home more often. Okay. But then the services that are in the prison, the Securus and the JPay made $114 million last year.
And tell us what that is.
JPay is an email system where your loved one can email you, and they charge you 50 cents.
Okay.
And then you email them back, it's another 50 cents.
Okay.
But for $1. But if they're making $114 million profit, why can't they make it 10 cents to email?
Okay.
And they still can make a profit. And we understand that business has to make a profit, but not at the expense of poor people. And that's exactly what's happening.
You mentioned another one. What is that?
Securus is what you can buy your loved ones regular socks and regular T-shirts.
Okay.
And some different shoes than state shoes and things like that. but the markup is tremendous. And they are also collecting multi-millions in profits.
Okay.
And so we would love to encourage them to reduce those costs so that more families could participate.
You said that the disparity is not just racial, it's based on the socioeconomic status of the prisoner.
Yes.
So does that play a role in the criminal justice system?
And I
anyway?
believe it does. According to the Associated Press, there are 5 times more African American men that are sentenced than white.
Okay.
And I think that goes back to the social part of it too, where you live and what you're used to and, you know, that type of thing. I actually have communication with about a dozen prisoners and on a regular basis. And then at Loop, we have a list with all of our loved ones on there. And each of us send cards and things to each other's loved ones.
No.
I reached out to a couple of them when I got this call and asked for their opinion. And they said that prison is the most segregation that they've ever lived in. And that it's the most prejudiced that they've ever experienced in their life. And a lot of these young men, you know, have grown up with prejudice, but they're experiencing it worse in prison.
So that's in the prison system, you know, that's ran by the state. There's a private prison system. Can you tell us a little about what that is and
Yes.
the upcoming of those?
So the private system, every inmate wants to go there because the food is better. The people are afraid to lose their jobs if they're mean, whereas at the state it's almost impossible to get fired. And and they like it because there's more freedom there. Just because they said that the inmates, the correction officers, are so much more kind, because in the regular prison systems, this doesn't go for, there's a lot of wonderful correction officers, and I've dealt with a lot of them that have helped us to get into the prisons and meet the families. But there's a big percentage that they feel, white or African American, they feel discriminated against because the color of their shirt. When they see that shirt, that means that I need to be tough on you. And that's the way they feel.
So who are the private prisons ran by?
It's investors or a private investor. Prisons are so overcrowded. And Director Moore was approached about building a new prison in Ohio. And he said no, he wants to build tech schools instead.
Okay.
And if you think about the situation where if a prison would go out, if they would just close down a prison, 75% of Ohio employees, state employees, work for the criminal justice system in some area or another.
Okay.
And so the loss of those jobs, plus the food workers. And so when they build prisons, it spares the economy because all the construction workers get jobs, the textile industry for making all the shirts, the pants, the shoes, just, you know, it's big business. Prisons are big business, and it's unfortunate.
Well, it sounds like to me you definitely have a passion for this. Tell us about, you know, for people that are watching this program and they don't really understand disparities in prison systems, what is it that you can say to them to help them understand how they can get involved if they have a loved one in a prison system and how important their voice is. What would you say to them?
Well, we would love to have a chapter in every big city, but we need volunteers. We would love to have more people go into the waiting rooms and just touch somebody's life by a smile and a hug. And so that's our biggest problem right now is the volunteers. And thank you for having me, because I'm hoping this will spur some volunteers on.
Okay, well, go ahead and give us your information on how people can get in touch with you. Or
my phone number is 614-582-5139. And I get a couple of calls every week from discouraged mothers where now their baby is gone. And maybe it was fair and maybe it wasn't. But in my opinion, from what I've seen, and I've only been involved 3 years, that it's not, more likely than not, it's not fair. And so then I think that Director Moore is just working very hard, but the system is broken.
right.
And I believe that, God said, if my people will humble themselves and call on my name, I will heal their land. And we believe God's going to heal the prison system. It may be a little at a time, but we just believe God for his word.
Right.
And I just talk to mothers, and sometimes they ask me, would you call my loved one? And I say yes. And I go to a lot of reentry seminars and things. And they have Faith Summit once a year that is really good. And all the born-again believers are there.
Wow.
And it's wonderful.
Well, as we begin to wrap up, I want you to be able to tell us when this prayer vigil is. Tell us when that is so that we can wrap up the
Okay.
segment.
So what we want to do, we feel like that the community doesn't forgive. God forgives the returning citizen, but the community doesn't. And so we want to pray for our loved ones that are in prison. That's going to be May 27th.
Okay.
It's a Friday evening, and they'll have to get in touch with me about the location. We haven't firmed that up. We just know that we're having it.
Oh, okay. But it's going to be May 27th.
Yes, in the Columbus area.
In the Columbus area. Thank you so much for joining us today.
All right, thank you.
That's our program. Thank you so much for watching. You can also check us out on Facebook at WSFJ-TV51. Join us again next week at the same time for Join Our Town.
This program has been sponsored by the Trinity Broadcasting Network and is made possible by your telethon dollars. Your continual support can keep Joy in Our Town coming to your home every week. Write to Joy in Our Town, 7790 North Central Drive, Lewis Center, Ohio, 43035.